Welcome back. Today I'll be showing you how to make a fully functioning survival style bow from green, undried wood, and in less than an hour. Part 1. Wood selection. Green wood is much more flexible than wood that's been properly dried. On the one hand, that makes your bow much harder to break, which is great for a hastily made bow. But the downside is that the wood can't store as much energy, so if you want to make a fast shooting bow, then you'll want to properly dry the wood. There are many great bow woods out there, but you should try whatever you have growing around you. Wood selection for survival style bows is much more forgiving than for bows made from properly dried wood, since the green undried wood is so much more flexible and difficult to break. I ended up choosing a maple sapling, about 1 or 1 1/4 inches thick. You really want to avoid anything too thick because you'll just have to work a lot harder carving away that extra thickness. Part 2. Cutting and debarking. Usually in the spring and summer the sap will be flowing, and the bark will be really easy to take off. In this case it was a little bit stubborn and it wouldn't just peel, so I had to remove the outer bark with a knife, which let the inner bark scrape away easily with the back of my knife. When you take off the bark, be really careful not to damage that first layer of wood under the bark, because if you do that might compromise the tension integrity of your bow. You need that back to be a clean strip of fibers that's not damaged, and that's going to give your bow the most strength and tension. Part 3. Roughing out the side profile, or the thickness taper. In order to get the bend nice and smooth, we have to taper the limbs, so that they're thinner at the tips and thicker at the inner limbs. I'm going to start out by thinning the tips to about 1/2 inch thick, and then later on I'll blend that taper into the limbs, as I test the bend of the bow against the ground. Later on we'll refine that taper, as we close in on the right tiller shape. Part 4. Roughing out the front profile, or the width taper. Now that the side profile is roughed out, we can cleanly visualize how we want our front profile to go. To start off, I'm just going to taper the outer 6 to 8 inches as they narrow into the tip. Later on we can adjust the front profile a little bit more with our knife. Try not to remove too much width from your bow, especially from the mid and the inner limb area. We want to keep as much width as we can so that the bow can store more energy. Part 5. Floor tillering. The main goal in tillering is to evenly distribute the bending stress, so that no one part of the bow is any more overworked. When you floor tiller, you want to push the center of the bow with one of the tips against the ground and the other tip held in your hand. Try to only push with about the target draw weight of your bow. If you have a target draw weight in mind, don't push any harder than that, or you'll just unnecessarily stress out the wood. The mantra here is that you only want to remove wood from the stiff areas. Identify any areas that are bending or are bending more than the rest, and leave those areas alone. Just remove wood from the stiff areas. Part 6. The string. I'm going to be using paracord for this bow, but you can also use your bootlace or whatever other kind of string you have. Just to be clear, most of these are not good bowstring materials. A proper bowstring will stretch much less and waste much less energy, but paracord will shoot an arrow if it's all you have. Since the paracord will stretch, you want one end of your bowstring to be adjustable, so that you can shorten the string appropriately. For the top loop, I'm just going to tie a really simple overhand knot, leaving a loop about 1 or 1.5 inches long. If you've already cut some nocks for your tips, test your loop to make sure that it fits well, but I'll be covering that step in the next part. For the other end of your string, I'm going to be showing you how to tie an adjustable timber hitch. For now we want the string to be over long, so cut it to about the length of your bow plus 10 inches or so. Part 7. Nocks. Now that we have a string, we have to cut some nocks so that our bow can accept the string. Keep in mind that the string's going to move as you draw the bow, so make sure that there's nowhere on your nocks that the string could snag. Part 8. Long string tillering. Now that we have a string and some nocks, we can get to tillering the bow with our long string. To start off, adjust the string so that it's about the length of your bow. You don't want it so loose that they're slack, and you don't want it so tight that you have to brace the bow to get it on. Once again, we're just going to be testing the bow while removing the stiff spots and leaving the bending areas alone. But this time we're going to check the bend by pulling on the long string. If you're not comfortable drawing the bow in front of your face, you can step on the bow and pull upward with the string, which is a little bit safer. Now, of course, the best way to do this would be with a tiller tree, but I'm trying not to use my shop or any of my advanced tools for this build. Part 9. Short string tillering. Once the bow starts bending a little bit further, then we can brace the thing. I like to do this around half the draw length or a little bit further, but some bowyers do it sooner. It's a little bit of a personal preference when you actually switch to bracing the bow. All you have to do is adjust your timber hitch so that you have to brace the bow to get it on. You'll need to fiddle a bit to get the right brace height. When shooting, I like about a 6-inch brace height, but for this construction part of the phase, 3 or 4 inches is fine and will stress the bow out a little bit less. Keep checking how the bow bends, and keep following that mantra of removing wood from the stiff areas and leaving the bending areas alone. You can see that I've hit full draw, but I have a few tiller issues. The top limb is bending too much from one spot, and is bending a little bit more than the bottom limb overall. So I'm going to work the bottom limb overall to try to get it to bend more, and then I'm going to work the top limb everywhere but that spot where it's bending too much. After a few adjustments, the tiller's looking a little bit better. It's really far from perfect. I would call this a pretty bad tiller. Now, for a bow made from green undried wood, that's pretty fine since the wood's so flexible. But if I were making a bow from properly dried wood, which is a little bit more brittle, I'd really want to take the time to get a nice tiller shape with a nice smooth bend and no hinges. Part 10. Shooting and retillering. The problem with making bows from green wood is that the characteristics of the wood will change as the wood dries. When your bow dries out, the draw weight will increase, which will make it store more energy. Now that might make it shoot faster for a little while, but eventually the bow could overwhelm itself. So you'll have to retiller the bow as it dries to make sure the bend is nice and smooth and the tiller is safe. Now the other option is just to treat these greenwood survival bows as somewhat disposable. If you want a bow that lasts a long time, you may as well go through the proper drying process, and make sure you never bend the bow while it's wet, which will permanently damage it. Unfortunately, properly drying bow wood can take months to years, but if you'd like to get started sooner, check out my quick drying tutorial, or my board bow tutorial that you can follow with lumber from the big box store. Alright everyone, I hope you have some fun making survival bows and arrows, and if you'd like to see how I made these arrows, let me know down in the comments and I'll put out a guide. That's all for today. I'll see you next time, and until then, may your arrows fly true.